Hello. We got this right here. Excellent. Amazing. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the National Press Club. We are so delighted to have you all here for our Headliners book event tonight. I was going to say the formal program was going to begin in one moment, but I think it's actually just beginning now. But if you haven't had the chance yet, please take out your phone. Take one photo to share with all your friends on social media, bragging how you're at this great event tonight, and then put your phone on silent so we don't have an awkward moment during it. As you know, for the National Press Club, we also love to do audience questions. There is a reason there is a card on your seat. If you just want to fill that out with a question, eventually Cecily, who's back there in the lovely turtleneck, will bring those to the front. Just be aware that I can't read bad handwriting. So if you could just take a minute to make it as legible as humanly possible, I would deeply, deeply appreciate that so we can ask Joan your question, which of course brings me to our guest of honor, Joan Lunden. We're thrilled to have you here.
Thank you.
I don't think I need to give you too much of an introduction in a room full of journalists, but I will give you at least a little bit of one because Cecily did a great job writing it out. So of course, from 1976 to 1997, millions of Americans started their days with Joan on Good Morning America. Since then, she has contributed to work in broadcast with ABC, PBS, NBC. She has advocated for breast cancer awareness, senior health, and the working woman. And she's here today to discuss her brand new memoir, her 11th book, Joan,
Life Beyond the Script.
There it was. I was like, wait, no, there it is. It doesn't matter. It's Joan. That's the part we're all excited about. And this book is personal in ways that Joan hasn't, even though you've had 11 books. This book has a number of new anecdotes, things we haven't seen before, including cancer, sexual harassment, motherhood, some of the stuff I know we can dig a little bit deeper in tonight. And I know a number of stories that you're excited to share. But Joan, I should also just note that, everyone knows you, I think, from Good Morning America, but you've also done so much work after that, from various programs to being a visitor professor at Lehigh University. Lehigh. Oh, sorry.
If my husband's watching, he graduated from Lehigh, so he would be upset if I didn't correct that.
I apologize to Joan's husband. I'm sorry. You've testified in front of Congress. You've worked with the FDA, and we're really thrilled to have you here tonight, Joan.
Thanks.
So thank you so much. And I guess the one thing I wanted to start with is, as someone who's written 11 books, you note that there are things that are in this book that aren't in any others. And why did you feel like now was the right time to put those in a book?
Most of the books that I've done in the past have been reflective of whatever chapter of my life I was in. You and I went through having 3 babies and then realizing you really need to lose this weight because you have a job in television. And that was so difficult. I took a year and really transformed myself. So somebody said you should write a book about it. So I wrote Healthy Living, Healthy Cooking, Healthy Living, had twins, wrote Growing Up Healthy. And if you see a theme there, my dad was a cancer surgeon, always thought I would be a doctor. Just didn't occur to me that I wouldn't be until right before I went to college. I worked in a hospital for 3 months. I found out pretty quickly that stitches and scalpels were probably not going to be part of my lifetime. And so went into this industry. And, I never would have ever believed back in 1973 when I got into journalism that I would write 11 books. But I've found over the years that sharing your stories really does help others. I mean, it can really inspire others. It can motivate them. And sometimes it can just make them feel less alone because you write that you're going through the same kind of life challenges that everybody else out there goes through. But this is the first time I've written a book about my life and career. And it's hard to put a life like I've had into 100,000 words. And I didn't quite make it. It's 106,000 words, but whatever. And my husband said to me one day, you forget that you live this extraordinary life. Because to you, it was ordinary. It was just your life. He said, but you got to remember, by anybody else's measurement, it was extraordinary. So the challenge was to decide what are the most important things to put in the book. And I'll tell you, I wrote it once and turned it in, and my publisher, Laura Morton, said it's an autobiography. It's Joan Lunden reporting on Joan Lunden's life, which I would expect from you. Your readers are going to want a memoir. They're going to want you to take them into that moment and talk about whether it was a scary moment or a vulnerable moment or something that like really propelled you to to move on. And so we picked those stories. And the only problem with doing that, of opening up those moments, is you have to leave 6 other stories out, which was kind of excruciating. But I love the way it came out because it's more like a novel in the sense that it kind of takes you through into my life and through my life.
And it's called Life Beyond the Script. I'm wondering, when you say the script, what does that mean? And was it a script that you wrote? Was it a script someone else was writing for you?
It's a script that you kind of have lived by and that everybody expects of you. And probably it was really spurred by the fact that when I left Good Morning America, everyone expected me to pop up on the Today Show or somewhere else. And I had a lot of those opportunities, and I didn't lean into them. Maybe it was because it was 25 years of absolute sleep deprivation and being completely exhausted and having met a man that I knew I wanted to spend my life with and wanting some normalcy. But I don't think I could have really written it until now, because only at this point can I look at the total arc of my life and career and realize that I didn't have to top that. I didn't have to do the same thing. And that the last 25 years of my life have had some extraordinary opportunities to really kind of make a difference. Like in breast cancer, testifying before the FDA and really fighting to get mandatory mammogram reporting, testifying before the House Ways and Means Committee to expand the Family Medical and Leave Act to not only cover, the beginning of life, mothers at birth, but also the end of life, where, so many people have to leave their jobs and take care of loved ones in their later years. So I think only now in this process can you start to say, so wait a second, maybe the second 25 years, really it took you in a different direction, an equally important direction, even though everybody knows you for those 25 years in the spotlight.
But the advocacy that you've been able to do and the issues you've been able to really put your voice and put your brand and put yourself behind.
And a lot of it has obviously been health related. And once again, I used to hog all the health stories at Good Morning America. But I think when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I started this before that. And then I got diagnosed with breast cancer in 2014. And all of a sudden I thought, wow, I just got this amazing gift dropped in my lap, which is hard to say when you get a cancer diagnosis. But I realized that with my platform, I could go out and learn everything I could about breast cancer, take my phone into every appointment, show women what it was like. And I've had a lot of women say, by what you did, it took the scary out of it. And I kind of knew what to expect. And then, of course, I really entered into the world of advocacy. And then I got so involved in women's health projects that I got the itch to write a book about women and aging. So I wrote my last book, which was, Why Did I Come Into This Room? A book about aging and women's health. And it came out on March 13th, 2020. Anybody remember what happened that day? Yeah, that kind of took care of that book tour.
But you pivoted. You did Facebook.
Yeah.
You were on there every day. You were interviewing people, and you still, I believe, it was a New York Times bestseller. So
yes,
clearly,
it was.
you still found a way to make that work, to sort of pivot. I know you talk in this lot about this book, sort of about taking chances, reinventing yourself, finding the next thing. I want to get to that. I also do, especially since we are at the National Press Club and we have a number of journalists in the audience, just talk a minute about the industry, because we're talking a little bit about just all of the changes, especially for broadcast news, as far as going out with a team versus now you just go out with one camera, and it used to be you had time to put it together, and now you're on in 35 seconds.
And a lot of those changes, I think, have kind of got us to where we are today. When I started in 1973, it was an all-white male industry, full stop. And I was not exactly welcomed in that newsroom. And that was the bad part. But the good part is that there was so much pressure being put on local stations by the FCC to start hiring women that it gave opportunity. But back then, even when I came to New York City in 1975 as a street reporter, and by the way, in Sacramento, I was never actually a street reporter. They started me as a weather girl, back at a time when they actually called us weather girls. And then a consumer reporter, and then an anchor. I got the offer to go to New York City to be a street reporter, and I'd never done that, but I thought, I'll figure it out when I get there. Again, my husband always says, the page out of the Joan Lunden playbook is, whenever anyone asks you if you can do something, just say yes, and then go figure out how to do it. And that's really kind of what has propelled me. But what changed about the industry is that when I started, we shot on film. So you would go out with the crew, we went out and basically you were doing like mini movies. And then you would come back to the station and would go into the soup, you'd have to wait for it to develop, you had time to think about the story, and then you worked with the editor, picked out the best parts, and put together your story for that night. Then videotape came along. Now all of a sudden you went out with one person, so it was much more economical for the station. But you'd be out somewhere and they'd say, okay, so like do a voice track, hand the film to the messenger, and you're going to your next story. So now that time to think about a story really got truncated. And then we got our first satellite truck. And I went out on the first satellite truck from Eyewitness News in New York, and we got to the location. It was after 6, so the show had already started, and I hadn't gotten out of the truck. The guys were putting the dish for the first time up on top of the truck, and I put my earpiece in, and I heard the director in New York in the control room. Joan, can you hear me? Yeah, I can hear you. All right, we're coming to you in 35 seconds. I hadn't gotten out of the truck, I hadn't talked to anybody, I hadn't shot anything. And in that moment, I knew my industry had drastically changed forever. And that it was going to be whoever got there first and got the story on the air first. And that, that really changed the way we collected and broadcast news.
I mean, I'm curious if you were to give advice to a journalist who's starting out today, as far as how they could think, because you have navigated the industry so well, saying yes, figuring out how to do. I have no clue how you do weather, but doing man on the street, doing the anchor piece. What kind of advice or suggestions would you have as far as keeping up with today when there is this element of it's live, it's happening now, you need to move now?
My advice is still to try to get to do all those things at local stations and learn the industry. The only way you can get used to and get good at being on the air is to be on the air, ironically. And, back when I first started, critics would have a heyday because there's a lot of things I didn't know. Like when I first started out and they started using a blue screen, behind you so they could run film of the rain when the weatherman was standing there in the studio, not in the rain. They said, we want you to do some consumer reporting. So we're going to send you out with a cameraman. You're going to do, the prices of food and recalls. So go to the grocery store and shoot, footage of milk and tomatoes and whatever. And so the first night that my film ran, I didn't realize back in the day, no judgment, we wore a lot of blue eyeshadow, okay? And so we didn't have teleprompter. So every time I would look down at the script, you'd see tomatoes and eggs and things. And all the men up in the newsroom said, don't tell her. Like, because we want to keep this going. They would write copy for me, trying to see if they could mess me up on air.
Would it be like tongue twisters? Or
tongue twisters. Oh, when I got to New York and anchoring the Sunday News, the sailing ship sailed into the South Street seaport on this. I mean, they would write those stories. But, there was a push at that time. And as long as you did your research and you were ready and you got up there and you showed up and you did your job, I remember the first time when I was at Good Morning America, I got to interview Barbara Walters. And she had been like the only real woman you ever saw on the news when I started in the early 70s. And she was on for some special. I don't remember what the special was, but she took me aside and said, this was 1980. She said, don't fight for equality. She said, if you do that here, you're going to end up right where your predecessors ended up, right out the door. That time has not come yet, but here's what you do. Take every small assignment that they're willing to give you and make those shine. Make each one a gem. Make them so good that they can't help but notice you. And that's really kind of, how it progressed. But I will tell you, it was when Charlie Gibson came from Capitol Hill and joined us at Good Morning America that things really changed. But I only learned recently, at the 50th anniversary of Good Morning America, Charlie and Spencer and I went out to dinner, and Charlie said, remember the first day I walked into the office? I said, I know, and you came into my, he said, oh, no, before I came into your office, all the executives called me in, and they said, all right, you need to establish yourself as the alpha male right now. Like right off the bat, establish yourself with Joan and the audience as the alpha male. And he said, I looked at them and thought, and said, well, that's the way the show's been for the last 10 years, but I don't really think that's what the American audience wants now. Then he walked into my office, and this is the part I knew, and this is the part that's in the book. He walked into my office and sat down in front of me and said, let's show America that a man and a woman can do a job on television as equals. And I said, you got a deal, buddy. And he was just the best co-anchor anyone could ever ask for. He always lived up to that. And that is what America wanted, because our ratings went through the roof. And so I had this, I learned a lot also from David Hartman in the beginning days. But when Charlie came along, it really became, the kind of broadcast that took us to today's world where there's so many women on the air now.
And I feel like when you do have shows, what they want to see is they want to see chemistry. They want to see the anchors interacting with each other. They want you to have, everyone's happy, everyone's having a good time, everyone's kind of like has a piece of the pie. Not that there's one who's the alpha and then someone who's off to the sides.
So another difference, though, is that morning television is very different. You're at home, maybe your hair is not brushed, you haven't brushed your teeth, you're not dressed, you wouldn't invite your friends over, and here we would be like all chirpy on the sofa, good morning. We understood that that was a very different day part. It's not like at night where you have that clicker and you're like around. People in the morning tend to be more loyal to one station, one network. And so that kind of television in the morning, there is no faking it. Like people I know have asked my husband, what's Joan like? Exactly like she is on television. Because particularly in that morning audience, it's not just you talking to a camera, you're interacting. So you are on TV like you are, in real life. And the other thing I really want to talk about and point out that's very different, and I hear it from all of my followers on Facebook, my 100,000 BFFs that I don't know, but they're really nice. I have a really nice community.
Your online community.
My online community. And they always say, we yearn for how you guys used to do the show. And here's how we used to do the show. You never knew our opinion about anything. I remember when I first got to the show, David Hartman said, I don't know if you're registered as a Democrat or Republican, but go register as an independent right now, because you never want anyone out there to think you have a political bias. So when I would have an interview, and I have a great example, Tipper Gore, I don't know if you guys remember when she came out with her campaign to put labeling on albums, because back then you couldn't stream music, you actually had to buy an album. And she came out with this campaign to put stickers on the albums that had explicit lyrics. And if it has an explicit cover, she wanted them under the counter. So I'm now doing an interview with Tipper Gore and Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead. Musicians kind of thought it was infringing on their First Amendment right. And at the end of that interview, our job was that you didn't know what side of that issue that I was on. Now, back then, there was they could only write us letters, and we get boxes of letters. Some would say, well, obviously you were on the side of Tipper Gore, you're a mother with children. The other half would say, obviously you were on the side of Jerry Garcia because you're a journalist and you believe in the First Amendment, because everybody watches things through their own, their own biases. But that's a huge difference, and one that people really yearn for today. But I don't think you can put the toothpaste back in the tube.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like we've almost gone to the other side, where it's like actually people want the folks they're getting the news from to have an opinion, which. Yeah, I'm not. We could spend the rest of the night talking about that.
Yeah, we could spend the rest of the night on that one.
I did want to talk about something that you decided to include in this book from your time at ABC. There was an executive there who basically made advances on you. You rejected those advances, and as a result, you started seeing your stories getting rejected, your airtime being cut. And I wanted to see if you wanted to sort of add anything about sort of how that unfolded, but also I was just curious as far as why you decided that now was the time to tell that story.
For the last, 8-10 years, the whole Me Too thing, and people have always called me up and said, did you have an experience? And I didn't want to get into the fray. That's just kind of not me. But if you're going to write a book about your life, you don't want to just write about all the happy, great times. You want to write a true book and talk about the times that were really difficult. And that time happened to be when I was at local Eyewitness News. And that means back in those days, you would get a base salary, and then you get a fee for every time you were on the air. So if you weren't on the air, you weren't making as much money. And somebody had come in new at the station and was really a mentor in the beginning and really helped me and taught me a lot. If only he could have just done that. But, he got eyes for something else. And one day he said, I know you haven't really, made a lot of friends here at Eyewitness News, which was a very different. This guy, Al Primo, had come in and decided that New York news should have a broadcast that resembled everybody that was out in the streets of New York. And he hired a very ethnic group, Geraldo Rivera, and who later went on. Oh, and when he hired him, by the way, he was actually an attorney, and his name was Jerry Rivers. And when he hired him, he said, I'll hire you, but you got to go by your birth name. You got to go by Geraldo Rivera. And he's like, okay. But back then, he had come in and he said, there's going to be a big Eyewitness News party. It's going to be out on Fire Island. You should come, get to know the people. And I was like, oh, no, because I'll feel awkward. He said, no, you should get to know everybody. So I said, okay, I don't even know where Fire Island is. I've never been there. He said, well, I'm going there, so I'll take you. He came and picked me up and took me to the ferry. You'd go over to the island, no cars, and got to this house where there was another couple, another reporter, and a female. And time's going on, it's where is everybody? Oh, everyone had something else to do. I was like, I did not buy into this.
And you're trapped there.
And you're trapped on Fire Island. It's not like you can walk outside and hail a cab. And now it's getting dark. And so, I sat down and tried not to be too ornery at dinner, but I'm thinking, what am I going to do? And finally, the other couple goes off to the bedroom and he says, all right, let's go to the bedroom. And I'm no chance. So I slept on the sofa with no pillow, no nothing. And as soon as it got light out, I got out and found my way back to the ferry. But after that, he was so angry at me that he started killing all my stories. And I finally got to the point where, and people in the newsroom noticed it. And of course, he let everybody know that I went to Fire Island with him. And I finally called him in one day to my office that I shared with 3 other female correspondents, and I kind of put my big girl, I'm very non-confrontational, so I put my big girl pants on, I confronted him, and I told him that I had, gotten an attorney and that we were going to sue WABC and him for sexual harassment. That got his attention, and I said, no, attorneys really don't want me to do this, but I don't really want to go through the legal process. I'm giving you one chance right now to apologize and never kill a story of mine again and leave me alone. And he said, I'm sorry, it won't happen again, walked out. Now, if looks could kill, I would have been killed many times after that, but he did at least stop that. I call him Ted in the book. That's not his real name because he's still in the industry. And I hope he reads the book.
Can I? Did you have an attorney?
No.
Oh my gosh, I love it. So it just was like a straight bluff, just like I hired an attorney.
It was a total
they're
straight
doing
bluff.
the thing.
I don't think I own up to that in the book, but you guys all now know. It was a bluff.
Wait.
But it worked.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, seriously.
Because back then, I don't even know if there was an HR. Like, I wouldn't have known who to go to, and he was my superior.
At the time, do you remember like talking with any of your female colleagues or having like a trusted male colleague that you could be like, hey, this happened, it was weird, what do I do?
This was this tight-knit ethnic group. Roseanne Scamardella, who Saturday Night Live did Rosanna Dana after, Gloria Rojas, Geraldo Rivera. This was a group, and then they brought in this blonde from California. And by the way, my name was Blunden. My dad was Dr. Blunden. And they called me in and they said, we think you should change your name because when you write Blunden, it can look like blunder, and we don't want the critics to have a heyday with it. Now, I remembered as a child going into restaurants, and you leave your name, and we'd be sitting waiting, and they say, Dr. Blunder, your table is ready, and it would infuriate my dad. Like, a doctor can't be a blunder. And I remembered that, so the guy had a point. And I remember Gloria Rojas says, I think you should call yourself Joan Cartwright. I said, why? Well, because you're from California, the Ponderosa. Do you even know the show Ponderosa? And the Cartwrights owned the Ponderosa. All right, I said, do you think all of California looks like the Ponderosa? Anyway, I didn't go with Joan Cartwright. And finally, one of the other, I popped my head in the next day because they were sending me out on my first story. And I said, I got to get the name thing worked out here. And there was a reporter, Doug Johnson, sitting there. He said, just drop the B and call yourself London. It's like the city. It's like at the time there was Julie London, a star, some of you may remember. And so it happened that fast. Literally in 5 seconds, I became Joan Lunden.
Wow.
And I went out and got in the car and went on my story.
My gosh. It's kind of an elegant solution, I have to say. Just drop the B, keep on going.
Yeah, I mean, it was really easy, except every time I go to get my cleaning at the cleaners, I don't know, it's either Blunden or London. I mean, the first time I had to, do the end of a story, it took me about 3 times to actually say, Joan Lunden, Eyewitness News.
Oh my gosh.
But and then I had to call my mother.
Yeah, I
Hi,
was
Mom,
debating
I'm going to
whether
be
ask
really
about
famous,
that.
but not with your name. But I started with, remember that time that we were in a restaurant and they called Dad's name Dr. Blunder and he got so upset? It was a good way. It was a good open.
So your mom wound up being okay?
Yeah,
Parents
she
wound up
went
being
along
okay
with it.
Okay.
I took her to the White House a lot of times. She got along.
She wound up benefiting her.
Yeah.
We do have a question from the
All right.
audience. Beautiful penmanship, by the way. Thank you. Have you watched TV drama The Morning Show?
Oh, yeah.
And if so, do you think it captures the modern experience for a broadcaster?
So I was invited to the premiere of The Morning Show. It's also the premiere of Apple TV. And I remember I walked in, and Jennifer Aniston and Reese Witherspoon, they came running over. We want you when we do our table read for the next season, because we want some good dirt from you. And I said, okay. But of course, that table read got canned because COVID happened. But Tim Cook, the CEO, I remember he came over to me after we went in, we saw the first couple episodes, and we came out, and he came up behind me, he said, how close did we get? I said, there was a lot of backstabbing, and there were women that came into the studio after we got off the air to audition to try to take my job. That happened many, many times. I said, but we did not drop the F-bomb every 5 seconds. There was much more respect. I never would have talked to my producers ever the way I said, but I understand it's literary license, it's a television show. But it wasn't as, quite as adversarial, every moment of it. But there was a lot of cattiness.
Yeah, I guess that is one thing for TV. It's we don't have time to do the subtle nuances. We just need everyone to put their cards on the table here.
Quite frankly, we didn't have the time to do all that fighting. It was we were getting stories ready. We were deciding what to be on the next day's show. We were traveling the world. You know, that show, one of the wonderful things about it is that I emanated from 28 different countries live, you know. We were just, Charlie Gibson used to say, it's the best seat from which to view the world, you know, because you're wherever history is being made, and you get to tell everybody what's happening. You know, and I got to cover 5 presidents and 3 royal weddings and 5 Olympics. But it's always my 7 kids that get the applause, because we know that's the hard job.
Yes. And I wanted, because I know you get into this in your book, and of course in other books as well. I mean, just the fact that you have really one of the first women to really break the glass ceiling in terms of being a mother and being open about being a mother and caring for a kid. I mean, having a 7 week. Do you want to tell the story a bit just about how
Getting the phone call?
Yes, exactly.
So I was in my news cubby at Eyewitness News getting my story ready for the 6 o'clock show. I had about half an hour to go. Phone rings. It's my agent. He says, I just got the call from ABC. They're giving you the job as co-host of Good Morning America. I was like, oh my God, that's great. I'll call you right after the show. I've got to get my story ready. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. It was my gynecologist. Congratulations, you're pregnant with your first child. And I honestly never thought about, oh man, that would have been so great, like bad timing. I just said, all right, I got to figure out how I'm going to do this one. And I delivered on the 4th of July, and they had me scheduled to come to work and start as the co-host August 27th. So I said to my agent, will you just call ABC and ask them if I can bring the baby with me, because I'm breastfeeding. By the way, in 1979, when he had to ask that question, you could not say the word breastfeeding on television. It was one of those words with the FCC, breast or breastfeeding. And so it was supposed, and kudos to ABC for saying yes. They just wanted my tush in that seat, you know, because they wanted to get the fall lineup going. So the first day I arrive, I've got my 7-week-old baby, and they do this big press conference after the show to announce the new co-host. And the place was packed, and we thought, wow, like it's packed, you know, for this. And they took me aside and said, whatever you do, don't mention that you have a baby upstairs. There's television critics there. They're going to chew you up and spit you out. I was like, I didn't really plan on bringing it up. Now David Hartman introduces me. I say hello. I open it up to questions. First question, Time Magazine. We hear you're bringing your baby to work. How did you get ABC to do that? So, I mean, your eyes shoot to all the executives. Like, I had to answer the question. So I said, you know, well, actually, I'm breastfeeding. You can print that. And they're letting me bring my baby to work. Second question, Newsweek magazine. This show travels the globe. What are you going to do? Actually, ABC gave me the right to bring the baby with me for the first year. And by the way, 11 months later, I took her with me to cover the royal wedding of Prince Charles and Diana.
Wow. Logistically, I just imagine there must be so much to it, right? Because you need a room where you can breastfeed, or a room that you can pump, and then if you pump, you need a fridge where you can put the milk, and you need
Can
the
I tell you, there weren't breast pumps back then like there are now.
Oh, okay, sorry.
That just wasn't a thing.
You and I were discussing how there's been a lot of changes in how women of my job, like I know some of the things, but not all the things.
Yeah.
Good to know. Good to know. Okay.
So they gave me a little room. They gave me the dressing room next to my dressing room, and they put a crib in there. And so I would come in the morning. I would scoop her up at 3:30 in the morning when I got up, and you know, try to gingerly change her diaper so I wouldn't awaken her. And I'd get in the car with my 80-page script, and I would breastfeed. You know, first hour, second hour, and I'd get there. She'd be zonked. I'd put her in the crib, and one morning Barbara Walters came in, and she said hi, and she started walking down the hall to the coffee room, and she stopped, and she was just standing there looking into what I knew was baby Jamie's dressing room. And she came back and said, I don't even believe what I'm looking at. Like, they let you bring a baby in. Like, there's no way I could have ever asked to bring, you know, a daughter in to work with me. It was definitely, I don't think ABC understood really when they said yes, that it was going to have the ripple effect that it did across corporate America, or that it would resonate so much with our audience. I mean, we just got such a positive response. women would write and say, thank you for showing my boss or my husband that as your belly gets bigger, that your brain does not get smaller, that you can actually still do your job. Now, something I learned just recently, because I've been fact-checking for the last year with one of the producers of our show, and he was the producer of the show back when I first brought baby Jamie in with me. And he said, I never told you this story. He said, but when you really started a show, and we couldn't wear those cute little dresses that show the little baby bump. We wore tents. It was not the most attractive thing, those A-line dresses. And he said, I got a call from the head of entertainment, and our show was under the entertainment division for the first 10 years. And he said, you got to get that Joan Lunden off the air now. And he said, why? Well, because nobody wants to see a pregnant woman walking down the street, let alone on the television in the morning when they're having breakfast. And he said, I said to him, that's not the response we're getting from our audience. We're really getting a positive response. And he said he got together with David Hartman and a couple of the other producers, and they banded together, and finally the president of entertainment acquiesced and let me stay on, and I stayed on until like 2 weeks before delivery. But it was a big deal because unlike today where most of the anchors sit behind a news desk, we sat behind a really low coffee table. There was no hiding it. So that was the first time. I remember one time I did some project with Florence Henderson, remember her? She was a Today Show gal, which is what they called the women on the Today Show back in the day before Barbara kind of bumped it up to another level. She said, I worked on the Today Show and I got pregnant. And as soon as they could start to see it at all, even behind the desk, they took me off the air. They made me leave. So, that was just it was so different.
Why do you think that just the audience changed, that people like the genuineness and the authenticity, or do you think that there was always a miscalculation in how a pregnant woman would be perceived on the air?
I think that they like the authenticity, and they like the idea that they saw me showing up, being prepared, doing my interviews, and they knew also I was dealing with spit up and dirty diapers. So I will share with you. I can share it here. It is in the book. So one morning I'm interviewing some senator about then President Ronald Reagan's trickle-down economic theory. And all of a sudden, it was obviously time for baby Jamie to feed because I experienced inflation and trickle down, up close and personal. Fortunately, I was wearing like this, kind of a floral blouse. Nobody could really see it. The hairdresser came down with his blow dryer, and the show must go on. And that's the kind of thing that I think when my producers and other colleagues saw me deal with it and figure it out, roll with the punch, and get right back in and do your job. Those are the kind of things that I think tended to, after a while, I don't know if normalize it is the right word, but just kind of clear the runway for women in the future.
I have another question in the audience from National Press Club member Liz Kelly, who's also a founder for Goody PR. She said, congratulations on your book. As a publicist who is relentless about pitching stories to producers, I get no often. What is the secret to getting a yes, I want to cover your story?
Do all the work for them. Really produce the entire piece. And a lot of times that's how I hear it all the time from other people who are PR people. Produce the entire thing for them, give them the intro, give them the questions, produce the whole thing. And that's really what they kind of expect because it's like a fast-moving target today, news, every news station. And so if you do the work for them, there is more of a tendency to get the booking.
Wow, interesting. And we also have another question. Is there anything you didn't do throughout your career or life that you wish you had done?
Yeah, I wish I'd had a little bit more confidence in myself in the beginning, but I was still living in that era where, even today, but forever, little boys, they grow up, go out on that football field, you show them how strong you are, and they're encouraged to boast and to talk about themselves and to be strong. And girls didn't get that. Back in my day, the only way a little girl really got the chance to kind of stand out and be on stage and learn some self-confidence, learn how to be in front of an audience, was to dance and do dance recitals and march in parades. And I found that when I got into journalism, that all those things that I think really did help were all held against me. Like all of a sudden, it's like, ABC made a majorette into an anchor. Yeah, right. So, but that's the kind of thing that we dealt with. And you don't deal with that anymore. That we're beyond that, thank God. But, we're not at a point where it's obviously equal. But there are a lot of women on television today, on television news. So, as they say, we've come a long way, baby.
Yes, and I know as a woman who occasionally appears on television news, we have you women like you to thank for that, absolutely. Was there anything else you think that helped lead to that shift and that women today, men, I guess just anyone in the industry today can either continue doing to really make sure that we continue to get true equality for people in TV and in newsrooms?
Don't hold your breath. But I just think, as the FCC really put more pressure on local stations, more and more women start. And I'll tell you, I was in Sacramento, and I had made this pretty extraordinary trajectory up to anchor person in a very short time, just because they were trying to get women on the air. And what happened, I wasn't looking for another job. I was like reveling in my glory that I was an anchor in my hometown, Sacramento. And it was at an NBC affiliate. The CBS affiliate across town hired one of these news doctors, that come in and they, say, this is what we think your sportscaster should be an anchor and your weatherman. They do all kinds of studies. And they came in and their answer was, we need to get rid of that new blonde over there on the NBC affiliate. They started sending my tapes all across America. And I started getting calls from news directors like Detroit and Atlanta, like, we saw your video. Now, this is at a time when nobody had a video of themselves. Nobody had a videotape machine in their house. That wasn't a thing yet. So I was like, you saw a video of me? So I went back to that salesperson who first said you should think about going into this. I said, what is happening? He figured it out pretty quickly. And so he said, I don't know how to tell you which one of these stations and which one of these 6 markets is better. He said, but there's a guy who used to work here, head of sales, and he's in New York now, working at ABC. Let me call him, and you can tell him what the stations are, and he'll help you sort it through. So we called him up, and I reeled through the different stations that had called me. And he said, if you're getting all those offers, I'd like to bring you to New York to be on WABC right here in New York. And I said, what do you think I said? Okay. And he sent me a ticket. I went to New York, and they auditioned me. And like all the reporters back in Sacramento were like, you're doing what? Are you crazy? And when they heard that I said yes to a job as a street reporter, they knew I had not been a street reporter in Sacramento. And they were like, how can you even think you're going to be able to do this? So to me, it's like, I'm going to figure it out when I get there. And I'll learn out on the streets. And that's another important thing that I always say to young people today, because there's a tendency, because they get everything so instant gratification and they want to start at your business at the top. And there's a reason why companies start people in starting positions, so you can learn the business, learn the industry, learn the people who could actually hire you full-time or promote you. And there was a really good reason for me to spend 5 years on the streets of New York. And I was up for the job of Good Morning America host once before I actually got it. And I'm really glad I didn't get it then, because I wasn't ready for it. I came from Sacramento, which was kind of like, I call it a homogenized little town. I just felt like I was kind of a protected environment. I needed those 5 years on the streets of New York, seeing the social injustices and the poverty and the crime and what people really went through, so that you could really have the proper layers of knowledge and empathy if you were ever really going to sit at a network level and talk about the world have an understanding of what people went through. So I'm really glad that I got those 5 years out on the streets of New York City before I got the job at GMA.
And that all kind of ties into the theme of this book about reinvention. I know that, of course, as a bunch of journalists, we're very interested in your journalism career. But as we mentioned, you've had so many careers after that.
Yeah.
Can you talk about sort of the art of reinventing yourself? What were some of the more difficult reinventions that you went through? And what have you learned about going through the process?
Well, we live in a world today where people are going to have to be changing jobs and being phased out of corporations. They're going to have to reinvent themselves a lot. And I think the most important thing is to be open. You know, we tend to think of ourselves in terms of whatever we've been doing for the last 2, 5, 10, whatever years. And you don't, and I remember as I was leaving GMA and some snotty little young male reporter said, "Gee, Joan, how are you ever going to top this?" It was not a very nice question, but an appropriate question. But in time I learned you don't have to top that. If you can stay open, if you can keep your mind open and your heart open to other things you might really be good at if you just tried. And I did 10 different programs after leaving GMA, but nobody really necessarily knew that because they weren't on the air every morning in front of everyone's eyeballs. People sometimes will stop my husband and I and they'll say to me, "How are you enjoying retirement?" My husband will say, "Please just say you're enjoying it. Don't try to tell them all the things that you're doing." But I got so many opportunities that came to me. And granted, when you have a platform like Good Morning America for 20 years, a lot comes to you. And I was in a position to being able to kind of pick and choose. I tended to choose projects that were health related. That doctor's kid who never became a doctor, that just, you know, there's more than using a scalpel. There's other ways you can help people stay healthy. And that's to disseminate information so that they even have an understanding that they should go to a doctor in the first place. So that's what kind of led me to doing all of the advocacy work.
Was there any reinvention that you tried that just didn't pan out? And if so, what did you learn from it?
Not really.
Okay.
Well, no, I take that back. Right after I left GMA, they came to me, a big agency in New York and in Los Angeles, and they wanted me to do a talk show. And I just wasn't leaning into it. I mean, it was at a time, I don't know if you guys would even think in the timeline, but in 1998, and that's what this was, there must have been seriously 8 talk shows on. You know, Sally Jesse Rowell, Jerry Springer, I couldn't even name them all. There was such a proliferation of talk shows on throughout the day, and they weren't all going to make it. And they were asking me to go into that, to jump into that fray and do a talk show. And I said yes because I felt that's what everybody expected me to do. That was living in the script. But I didn't lean into it. I don't even know if I went to the office that many times that they had put together with the producers and everything to do the pilot. And then finally, I didn't have to worry about it because they were already working on a talk show with Queen Latifah, and they'd already sold it to half of the stations in America. And they came to the realization that there was no way that there were enough openings with this proliferation of talk shows to launch both shows. And hers had gotten a head start. And they came to me and said, "Well, we're not going to be able to do it." And I was like, phew. And that, I mean, so that's the one time that I think I kind of got out of it, out of doing something that I probably could have been really good at. I mean, but it was just such a crazy market to put yourself into. And I had such a successful career, I didn't really want to have, a failure on my hands.
Right. And sort of knowing the moment that it was okay to let it go, and it was like seeing the right.
Well, I didn't really know it. I was just making myself muddle my way through that. And, I was also, by the way, doing another show that started on ABC called Behind Closed Doors. And I had gone to ABC, and at that time, David Hartman was making like probably 10 times what I was making, and my contract came up, but his contract said that nobody else could make the kind of money that he was making and that nobody could be called the co-host. The very first book I ever did, I wanted to call Don't Call Me Co-Host, but we decided not to do that. A little negative. But I went to them and I said, let me do some specials, and then you can pay me for the specials. That way you're not encroaching on his contract. So they said, yeah, but we got all these other females. We got Connie Chung and Barbara Walters and Diane Sawyer. Everybody's doing these sit-down interviews. Like, there's not enough celebrities for you guys to all be doing it. I said, I don't want to do that. I want to do a show where I take people behind the closed doors of amazing careers, jet pilots, Navy SEALs, hostage rescue release, all these things. And they said, yeah, but they're not going to let you do that unless you went through training. I said, that's the whole point. We would film all the training. And I said, do you guys, anybody remember a show back in the day by George Plimpton? Okay, so George Plimpton used to do that, and that was the example I used. I said, I want to do my version of George Plimpton's show. You're too young, you wouldn't remember it. Where I will one day, he was like a Dallas cheerleader one time. So they said yes, and I don't know if anybody else would have done it at the time, because for every story I did, it took 5 or 6 days. They didn't let me go in an F-18 and land on the aircraft carrier unless I had 5 days of training. They didn't let me get in the U-2 and fly at 75,000 feet unless I went through all of the training for it. But to me, it was my ticket to adventure. I loved that show. And I was still doing that show. I took it from ABC, where it was a 3-time-a-year special. I took it to A&E, and it was a weekly. So I did 26 weeks of behind closed doors. And so the first time anybody saw me after I left GMA was in December, because I had left in September, and I went behind closed doors as a ballet showgirl on a Las Vegas stage. And I'm going to tell you, I've jumped with the Golden Knights, I've jumped with the 101st, I've deployed with the Navy SEALs. Going out on that stage as a ballet showgirl was the scariest thing
Oh my gosh.
that I ever did. I'm seriously.
Did people in the audience recognize you? Or they're like, wait a
Well,
second?
it was up on the marquee. Ballet's Jubilee, starring tonight, Joan Lunden.
Oh my gosh.
And you have to go out there with 100 girls that have legs that go forever, and not a whole lot on their body, and their legs are so long that if you don't keep up, you're going to be knocked right off the stage into to the guy that's sitting at the first table. And I remember the person who was training me. She said, "You're going to walk out there, and your job is to say without moving, 'Look at me,' and you're going to have to express your sensuality." And I said, when we're little kids, we like that look at me thing. Mommy, look at me, look at me, look at me, watch me do this. We lose that as we grow up. We don't have that anymore as adults, but that's actually what you had to kind of dig down in deep and tap into in order to do that one. Because that's every other story. I was in the back seat. There was a pilot in front of me at the U-2. There was a pilot in front of me in the F-16. I took 9Gs with the Thunderbirds. I'm really good at a cocktail party, because I've just gotten these opportunities to do these just crazy things, deploying with the Navy SEALs on the island of Viejas, taking it with, live gunfire and everything.
Do you have a favorite story?
Probably deploying with the Navy SEALs, or landing on the USS Eisenhower in an F-18 and then taking off, being catapulted off. That's like a roller coaster times 1,000. Because they literally, you put the throttle into full gear, but you're being held back by this huge, I don't know how to explain it. What is it?
A catapult.
Yeah, underneath the ship, and then all of a sudden they let it go, and you literally, they said if they catapulted a pickup truck off of that, it would go for a mile before it would ever drop into the ocean, which just gives you a sense of how far it catapults you. So when you're in the F-18, you're being catapulted, and then there's that moment where the catapult stops, and you realize that that it's the engine, but there's a moment where it kind of feels like you might drop into the ocean.
Oh my gosh.
Those are just amazing experiences that I got to do.
Yeah, and to go through like the training too, and to bring them to people, and I mean, there's the other interesting thing I think is that you have gotten so comfortable with sharing so much of your life. I know we talked about your first child, Jamie, but then your IVF journey, your surrogacy journey, everything you went through with cancer. How do you kind of think about how you present these moments that I think a lot of people would kind of see as intimate,
very personal.
private, personal? How do you sort of work through that in how you then present it to the public?
There was never a day that I actually signed a piece of paper that said every nuance of my personal life will now be up for public consumption and criticism. But when you reach kind of that level, you can't really. I get, you know what it is? On Good Morning America, I think I learned that if I shared my personal life in the right way and the right amount of it and not go over a line, that it created a bond and that people liked the idea that it was a real person sitting there, that was sharing, the news of the day. So I think that kind of taught me early on. It's funny, I have a daughter who's like a big influencer, and she said, "Mom, you were actually a momfluencer before we actually had the word influencer in our vocabulary." Because when I started, when I became like the working mom of America, and companies started coming to me like Beach Nut Baby Food and Hasbro Toys, and my agent came to me and said, "I just realized you actually can do these commercials because the show is under the entertainment division." And we figured out then, as long as you're extremely careful, and I mean really careful, of what you do a commercial for. As it turned out, because I did those, people actually thought as kind of almost like an add-on to, because I always made every company give some kind of takeaway, parenting takeaway, besides just buy the toy. And by the way, the way they get the little babies to be fascinated with the toys is they take Cheerios and they dip them in honey and they put it right on the back so that the child, when they say, "Okay, roll," and they put it there and the kid is like, "Ooh." And they would always bring 6 babies because one of them would be not peeing or pooing or crying at the moment that we rolled.
This is real. I'm never going to look at a baby commercial the same way
Nope.
again. We have another question from Caroline Tucker at NBC. I think that kind of goes off of it, the genuine aspect. But what role does television news still play today in a world where social media is driving the attention of our audience? How do people still engage in what is happening locally and nationally?
Well, I mean, we're in this very precarious time. And I truly believe it's not because network news isn't trying to put on programs that are unbiased. I truly believe ABC, NBC, CBS, you watch the news at night. I think if you ask them, they'd say, "We are doing our show unbiased." But people can't even see it that way anymore because there's such a proliferation now of all these different entities. I mean, anybody can put up a website and profess to be some kind of an expert and can report on something having done no research, having nothing particularly factual. And people are so barraged with all of that I think it's become very difficult to discern between one or the other. I mean, the biggest change really in the news business was the day, I remember after the show, we all went in the control room, we were all waiting for this 10 o'clock news conference with Ted Turner, who came on and said, "I'm going to start a 24-hour news service." We were like, how are they going to fill 24 hours? And would the American people have an appetite for that? I mean, we couldn't even fathom at that time that in the future there would be entertainment all-night channels, that there would be channels where you could buy sneakers at 4 o'clock in the morning. That just wasn't in your realm of thinking at that time. And then the next thing that really changed television news was the advent of Fox Television and a politically unapologetic biased news source. And that has seeped into, I think, unfortunately, some of the other newscasts. almost unconsciously because they feel a need to counter-program. And so, it's affected just how different news entities put on a broadcast. But I think if you ask most of them, do you think you put on your broadcast with an unbiased, fair vision? I think most of them would say yes to you. But that, it's again, I don't know if you can put the toothpaste back in the tube, and it's very, very hard for people today, especially young people. You said that I taught at Lehigh for a while. So when I was teaching at Lehigh, I taught public health and the media. And one day I said, out of curiosity, how many of you, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, how many of you get your news from television news? Not one hand. Mm-hmm. Your laptop, a couple of hands. Are you telling me that you all get all of your news on your phone? Every hand in the room. I said, so then let me ask you something else. How many in this room have a news alert? But I mean a real, honest news alert. And the three girls that were my pets were right up front. They raised their hands. I said, all right, obviously the assignment of the day is you all have to download a real news alert. I don't care what it's from, but it's got to be a real news entity. Mm-hmm. The following week, I looked at them all and I said, I don't know whether you are really taking notes on those laptops or whether you're trying to decide between the blue Nikes and the red Nikes. So from now on, this is going to be a no technology class. And they closed it and they said, well, how do we take notes? I said, next week, I'll bring some paper and some pens. And they said, we can't even use iPads? I said, no technology is no technology. Because I was doing this class where I was booking really great guests. I mean, I kind of produced every class as a television show, and and a lot of them were being zoomed in. And I had people like Charlie Dent come and talk that was from Allentown, and I was doing this at Lehigh, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, to come and talk about how legislation gets passed or doesn't get passed. I had Julie Gerberding, the first woman who ever was the head of the CDC. There were these great guests, and I wanted these students to pay attention. Do you know what this opportunity is to ask questions of these people? Mm-hmm. So it was quite an experience. I mean, when they said nobody watched television news, I said, well, I take personal offense to that. But it just goes to show you that if the younger generation is getting everything from their phones, and we know that those phones are based on algorithms. So we know that it's going to depend only on what they choose to see that's going to feed them everything else. And I don't know about you guys, but that's a huge concern to me about how the next generation is going to understand what's going on in the world. I said, how would you guys know if we went to war? Did they tell you that on TikTok? Don't tell. I know some of them told me that they're actually, amalgamated people that they can watch on TikTok. But it's just, it's a whole different way of consuming what is happening in the world today.
It's incredibly different. Joan, I know we are about at time. We've got one more question for you, but I did want to take just a quick moment to thank the organizers of today's event, Headliners Committee Chair Jen Judson, I got that out, and the National Press Club Executive Director DDA Soji, as well as our wonderful staff. This event would not have been possible without you. Thank you as well to our audience. We hope that some of you will consider joining us for tomorrow. We are having our annual Career Day, which is a high-impact day designed for journalists and communicators navigating one of the most challenging job markets that I think our industry has seen in the last couple of years. So we hope to see you there, or if you know for someone who's looking, please let them know. Tickets are still available. And for more information on this and other events, we invite you to the Press Club website, www.press.org. And now, Joan, it is my absolute honor to award you the National Press Club official mug.
I was told this is a really big deal.
It's been given to ambassadors, to celebrities, to famous journalists, and of course it is more than fitting to be with you as well. And then for one last final question, I just wanted to see, you talk about reinventing yourself. Do you have another reinvention planned or in the works? What is your next
I'm already
chapter?
starting to think about the next book.
Number 12.
Number 12. You know what? And I still have so many projects coming my way, and I'm working on several different ones right now. I mean, as long as, first of all, I think it's what keeps you young, and it keeps life interesting and challenging and exciting. So I don't plan, despite what everybody thinks, I don't plan on retiring anytime soon. So thank you for that. And I hope you'll all join me afterwards and come and get a book, and I'll sign it for you.
Yeah, and we'll look forward to hosting you for book number 12. But Joan, thank you again so much. It's a really great book. There's a I didn't even get to the QR code.
Oh, wait a second,
There's
that's
a
right.
QR code in here for all the chapters.
There's QR codes all throughout the book, and as you're reading the stories at the end of the chapter, you can put your phone right over that little QR code, and we'll actually open up to the video story. So I love breaking barriers and doing new things. So this way I can kind of show you my life as well as tell you in a literary sense.
Fantastic. Well, Joan, thank you again so much. Really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you, everyone.